This video is going to be a tour of my voice from low up to high, broken into 3 sections, and each section contains its own low and high sections. So we're going to go very low down to ultra low, and then we're going to go all the way up to
high and super high and higher than that and go as high as we can.
But there's a lot in between. So first of all, with low, the starting point I use for low is actually what I call the fat voice, which is putting the tongue on either side of your teeth as if you're chewing as if you've got like a big sweet stuck to each molar at the back, and then just adding that fatted, almost like you're out of breath, and creating a kind of, as if you're talking about a delicious chocolate cake and getting quite excited. And that's the fat voice. And then from there, you could go down lower into a kind of older style voice, something akin to a medieval king, or even go into a kind of Gandalf the Grey, you shall not pass kind of voice. And then going down to kind of Simon Cowell, still using that deep thing there, or the kind of banker sound, marching through the bank on a pair of roller skates. And even lower still, you'd go to this summer, one town, one man. And also, you'd have your gritty Ross Kemp on Gangs kind of voice there too. Or you could have your gritty northerner from Game of Thrones, something along those lines. It could be used for all sorts, something like that. And of course, it could also be an American kind of soldier talking about the war. And you've also got your kind of, still staying in the realms of the deep, you got your kind of, your southern accent, which is going down just fine, and has that little bit on the end, and still down in the low, still using the tone. And also you got your Morgan Freemans as well, also employing the slight bit of the fat voice in there. And then if you go even lower, I put raising the tongue almost entirely into the middle of the mouth and creating a kind of distorted zombie effect. And if you smooth this out, you get a kind of benevolent beast or a dragon from the forest. Something like that. And if we go into there, you can kind of find it's a little bit almost Boris Johnson-esque, and the sound that he uses, and you get that kind of Boris Johnson sound there, quite close to Benevolent Dragon, actually, whatever you call it. And then if you add tense up the throat now, you get your kind of forced low voices, almost a bit like the boomer character I had, who's just smoked one too many fags, and he's actually quite a nice bloke, really, but he's a slightly broken, what do you call that, husk in the mouth. But he's a lovely guy, just past it, really. And once you start tensing it, you can kind of do I got a kind of fat northern pig kind of sound, a bit like John Prescott, but I did this voice as a pig for an animation. But really, just a very fast kind of Brian Blessed thing going on with a mixture of the two. And once you get into that realm, you're tensing up your voice box here, really tensing that. And from there, you got your Husky Effect, which is really kind of where we enter the mid-range of the voices. And I find from this husky point, as I did with Trump, if you had the lips and the eye, you could start going into it. You could do a Donald Trump from here, or you could go, you could push it even further and go into somebody who's, like my character Gambling Joe, who's like, he smokes a lot of cigarettes every day, loves a bit of gambling, a little bit out of it. But again, I'm just tensing the voice up and tensing it up in a slightly more tight fashion. But all I'm doing there is, I'm going from up there, tightening it up,
at the top to tightening it down low for that one. And I think, for that's my kind of hipster sound, which is great for commercials about where you're trying to put across the idea of a cool hipster guy with a beard who's laying down a sweet turmeric latte on a reclaimed table somewhere in a trendy part of, if you thread that one around or Rick Mail, you can start to get something, very spoilt kind of sound. And I use that for a character called Zeke Von Gembu and really all it was a very blasé version of the same husky voice. And if you take that husk, you can also reach a kind of David Attenborough sound. Nobody knows. You see, it's the same thing. Nobody knows why they jump the way they do. One can only assume it's sheer joy. And that really is, it's the same husky effect, but just you're using the lips and trying to get the sound. And you see, that's an example of the husk is the same as the husk I was doing before, but it's pushed through the lips and mouth of the impression for David Attenborough. You can do an accent with your husky voice. You could do put an American accent through there. You get a kind of Texan sound going on. I mean, it works you get so many voices out of one voice.
And then you got your kind of doubled up husk with like a kind of lizard sound, but it's one of those voices that's quite easy. I feel like it's quite easy to do. A lot of people could do a kind of, I'm a guy with a husky with a kind of a gravelly lizard voice. But it's there if you need it. It's there for some of those characters. But I very rarely employ that one.
And the great thing about the husky voices is once you're done with them, you're left with actually quite a clear throat. So you can move on to the smooth talking voices and even start low for your Leah Damacheese. Older bloke doing a commercial for you should buy gold, and invest in your future today. And then up to, there's the more commercial sound, for $4.99 you can be part of the DFS experience. British Airways, Ford, go further, that kind of thing. From there you can take it up a notch to throw down the telly gauntlet with a slightly more positive take on the commercial voice. And if you go up one step higher, you can it's a more kind of conversational, ordinary bloke just trying to sell you something that you need. And if you go up a little bit higher than that, and these days you sometimes get a tiny bit of the urban style in there, because a lot of younger people today, like Generation Z, they've even if they're not completely doing it, they've still kind of got a little bit of street in there. That's what they pronounce their T's, but they're still got that little bit of urban in there, but they're still pronouncing their T's. So a glass of water, that I find I do hear that a lot. And then you kind of got my voice, which I can make a little bit more patronizing and turn into a character that's quite similar to me. So I use that for my A&R guy. So it's a normal guy. He's not that posh, but he's a little bit patronizing. And that voice can be used just to as a character, or it can be used to sell something. But ultimately, that's the clear basis. And then if I tense that slightly up, I get something a little bit more corporate and a little bit more just outside the M25. That's driving a Porsche, and that's what I call my Eric Smyblade voice. He takes himself very seriously, but he's actually quite stupid. And then that verges into Alan Partridge, so you've got to be careful. But it's just a pinch of Alan Partridge with a pinch of me. And so that's a relief. I do enjoy that character, that voice.
And from me, we can then go into the, I'd say, upper mid-range. This is just before you go high, but it's higher, but it's higher in the throat, so it's still low, but it sounds high. And there you have dog. I love doing this voice for animals. You can really push that down into a kind of alien space if you need to. But again, it's too caricatured, really, in my opinion.
But of course, you can push that lower and have a kind of dithering old man telling a story, or you can actually make it go quite beige. Kind of like quite a beige person. Yeah, a bit like my old landlord talking about, you can put a new shower head on the shower, or you get one of those Palm Beach devices and stick it on there. Well, if you lower that down, you get a kind of quite a ball. It's not the fat one, but it's a cross. But that would be the fat one, totally like that. But if you add in a bit of that with it, you get a kind of incredibly dull man talking about a printer or something for 45 minutes. And
In that mid-range nasal place, you could add an American accent to get the kind of Vox journalist, a kind of Google person, very patronizing, totally convinced in themselves, being benevolent. I really find that character hilarious. I really want to do something with that. But that's the kind of like Silicon Valley, cocaine using, prostitute hiring tech guru who drives an electric car. And so from there we can pull it back into the throat, like open up the entire windpipe, and you get a kind of Jordan Peterson sound. It's an incredibly complicated thing, and it also sounds pretty much like Kermit the Frog. It's a voice you would very rarely use. I don't really use that. I mean, it's a bit like Louis Theroux, but I can imagine using it, in a subtle way to bring a bit of character in to back up another character. But I wouldn't use this voice necessarily in any other way than that.
so that's kind of covering off the mid and low, and you can mix them together. But the high voices kind of start with,
going from there up to there and going into here, and you got your kind of cartoony voice. And I did this for the silly sausage toy, Twist Me, Poke Me, Shake Me, kind of based off the Hanky Panky the Christmas Pooh. And it's it's a typical impression of a cartoon voice with an American accent, and you could do it with an English voice too. It's just a kind of silly poke through high register thing.
And that can also go up to there to be more childish, and I don't want to. It's not fair. Daniel! But as you can hear, my voice is kind of breaking when I do that, so I can't do it as much as I used to.
And I've also got a kind of, you can also do a kind of impression of a child, a bit slightly higher there. But I don't know, it's almost getting into kind of like kind of like a kind of girl who's a little bit, kind of one of those slightly superficial girls who's like, does kind of talk like that. And I actually really like that way of speaking. And if you cross that over with the last one, you can, it actually sounds like that's probably what I call the camp voice. Another one I absolutely love doing, it's kind of got wand almost, isn't it? But it's kind of, it's not high, but it's also not low. It's not mid. It's very from ha, opening up, just vibrating there. So kind of back down low, really. And in those mid voices, and back in the mid voices, you had a little bit of laughter. And here we are. And again again with the mids, it's not quite like that, but it's opening it up a little bit, adding a little bit of a laugh, and suddenly you got your kind of classic nerd who's like, actually, I think it's like that, and I mean that's given birth to one of my characters called Lawrence, who's a PC gamer. But ultimately, it is those people who kind of always seem to be laughing as they're talking. And another thing, another thing you can do with the fat voice is, I've got the fat voice there, and then if I'm just pushing that out from my throat there, I start to get a kind of like, it's kind of like the London accent. You get me, like a lot of people.
Also in the Husky range, you could go up a little bit higher and do the Channel 4 advert this summer. A new program to Channel 4. It's been around since Big Brother. It's incredibly annoying, and it's everywhere.
And again, mid-range, we have, I suppose, a bit like Dogman, but it's a smooth one version of that. So then you get a kind of, what do you call it, Michael Howard effect. And it's very camp, very wry, quite cheeky. And that voice became, of course, Piero Piswall, PhD, my mineral water critic. And it at first it was an academic, and I used to put the glasses on the end of the nose. But I love the speed with which you speak, and the wheres and the whens and the whys of that voice. Also in my natural range, you kind of
Have kind of like a dad. Okay, kids, that one is like, it's just a kind of, all right, kids, get in the car. And sometimes, for certain adverts, you'll be like, okay, all right, kids, get in the car. It's kind of a very standard British bloke, recognisable. Also a bit like, you had a bit of husk on it too, like be somebody a bit nicer, a bit less, a bit less trouble, a bit less confident. But ultimately, all right, kids, get in the car. Single file, kids. Okay, last orders now, please. It's that sound. You hear it all over the country. It's a very vanilla, actually, very vanilla.
overall, those are the basic principles of the voices. Now, of course, you can play with those. You can mix them, match them, throw them into impressions of celebrities. You can throw accents on top of them. So there's about 50 or so voices there, and then each one can split off into, say, 4 or 5 other voices, which means you've probably got around 200 possibilities of what you can do if you mix and match those voices. So sometimes I'll end up doing something I didn't even know I could do because of what a director's asked me to do. But of course, ultimately you are always limited to what you can do with your voice and what part of your voice you've exercised. But nonetheless, it's been an interesting experience to kind of go through this range and make this video. So it was a pleasure to do the voice tour, and I hope to do another video soon regarding something else. But why not do a voice tour? Take care. Oh, that's gone off. Great.